So it turns out, since the last time that a lot of folks in the room and I spoke to each other, and nice to put some names with some faces for the first time, it turns out that you all were right when you suspected that your government, our government, the government, the United States federal government, took your money under threat of force, under the threat of use of violence, took your money, developed a war machine with it, and then blew up an international pipeline in the Baltic Sea. Turns out you were right about that. Now, for those of you who doubted that that was the case, and to be frank, I sort of doubted that that was the likely culprit as well, you have to admit that you're not completely shocked, right? Even if you didn't expect that was probably the doing of the U.S. federal government, you can't tell me that it hadn't crossed your mind, right? You can't tell me, whoa, didn't see that coming, right? You all have to say, at least on some level, used to be that we would characterize that as an act of war, and that we would characterize it as an act of war against the nation of Germany. It cost the good people of Germany dozens of billions of dollars on an annual basis in terms of increased costs of energy. It drove up the amount of revenue brought in by the good people of the Russian government, which, interestingly enough, is completely antithetical to the stated objectives of our own federal administration. It obviously cost dozens of billions of dollars to the multinational conglomerate that owns the pipeline. All of that is really horrible stuff, but what I'd like you to do is put a pin on that just for a moment when we talk about something else, because I want to argue that none of that is the reason why that was such a horrific thing that our government did. Turns out that it is also true that your government, our government, the government, the U.S. federal government, took your money, again, forcibly under the threat of violence, mixed it with a bunch of money from other nations' governments, funneled it through a multinational agency to a laboratory in Wuhan, China, where it was used for the purposes of accelerating gain-of-function research, which of course we're not allowed to say that it's actually gain-of-function research, right? It's a cousin of gain-of-function research. But money being fungible, no one is arguing that it didn't allow the laboratory to accelerate its own research into what is actually called gain-of-function for viral agents. And it appears that, let me say optimistically, we hope that it accidentally leaked, right? But apparently we now know that at least, whether accidentally or intentionally, it did leak from the laboratory, at least in part because the national government of China is resisting international oversight that would bring the laboratory up to the standards of best practices that could have prevented it. And it appears as though certain agents inside of our federal government knew everything that I just said a couple of years ago and decided that you didn't need to know that. The virus escaped, it killed several million people around the world, it killed probably a couple of million people inside the United States, and allowed our own government to leverage our fear thereof into an economic catastrophe that rivaled the magnitude of the disaster caused by the virus itself. All of that is really horrible stuff, and I want you to put a pin in that because I want to argue that all of that is not the worst aspect of that chapter either. These two disparate stories that seem like they have absolutely nothing to do with each other, right? I would like you to consider that what's really bad about these stories is that they have everything to do with each other. Where these stories intersect is what really matters. These are stories about governments operating not in the light of day, but in the shadows. There has become, I don't know exactly when, but at some point it became standard practice for there to be a bright line distinction for our federal government between what they will admit in daylight and what actually happens in the long run in the dark. Having said that, if you're not angry about it enough already, I invite you to become angry by the time you get to your second dessert today. Normally, as John said, I'm seeking the presidential nomination of the party, so normally I spend a lot of time talking about the opportunity that we have in 2024. I'm not going to talk about that today because, to be honest, I find that a little bit droll at the moment. We all know that we have an opportunity in 2024 which is unprecedented, and we all know why. So just to give it its 26-second due, it's because more people than ever before in the United States are sick of the duopoly. They believe that we are more open to, and it would be more appropriate to have a third-party player than ever before. Polling data shows this, and we know why. The leadership of each party stinks. There are deep fractures within each party, and each party has left behind the agenda that they once pursued as recently as 15 or 20 years ago. Each party now assumes to itself the right and the authority to pursue an agenda that has exactly one plank, which is keeping the other party out of power. And this is what they pursue at any and all costs to their own former agenda. This is their reason for being. This is what leads to an authoritarianism inside of democracy, and that's where we're going, and that's why it's an opportunity for us in 2024, and that's all we're going to talk about regarding that opportunity. What I want to talk to you about today is not opportunity, but obligation. This is not merely our opportunity in 2024. This is our call to duty. I would like for you to consider how many people are in this room and how many people were in the room earlier today. We're lucky to have this number of people, aren't we? There's several dozen people in the room right now. We had over 100, as I understand it, at our peak yesterday. That's terrific. That's not a large number of humans. You multiply that by 50 across the United States, that's being generous. Now you're up to some number like 5,000. That's not a large number of people. We have our work cut out for us. Please do not believe that there is anybody in the Republican Party or anybody in the Democratic Party who are going to stand up for your civil liberties, because it's not going to happen. There is nobody in the Republican Party that's going to stand up for criminal justice reform. There's nobody in the Democratic Party that's going to stand up for any of the constitutional protections that we believe are so important to the reason for being and what sustains our culture and the political environment that we wish to pursue in our future. It's not going to happen. As libertarians, we are the philosophical descendants of the people that put together the Declaration of Independence and our Constitution, and did so merely for the reason of protecting our individual liberties. If we don't stand up for it, nobody else will. If we go the way of our past, so will go the rest of our liberties. We no longer have the luxury of pretending that someone else is going to help us out. We don't have the luxury of pretending that we are going to be able to form some alliance or coalition. Yes, on an individual issue basis, all day long, let's pursue those alliances. When you have the opportunity to make something happen in the State House, if you have the opportunity to make something happen in Washington on a particular issue, by all means pursue it. And by the way, there is no higher calling than running for local office or a statewide office as a libertarian. You know in advance that you're going to get your ass kicked. You put it out there anyway. You get it kicked very, very hard. And I happen to know that there are people in this room that are coming back for a second bite of that apple. I am so dang proud of every single one of you. I've done it once myself. It's a wonderful and horrible experience. There's nothing more important to our party. And there is nothing more important to our party than pursuing those small victories when we can create alliances and coalitions to get something done. But having said that, please do not believe that we have long-term interests shared by members of the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. It is our obligation to represent the principles that this party represents, and to do so loudly and boldly and in a fashion that I would argue our national campaigns, and this is the reason why I'm running, have not done so in the past. My own campaign represents a stark departure from what we've done in the past, and that is purposeful. If I did not believe that, I wouldn't be bothering you, taking up your time, suggesting that there's any reason to look at our campaign in any distinction from any other campaign. It's not about me or my campaign, and to be honest, it's not about you or anybody else in this room. We have an obligation to people outside of this room who we call brothers and sisters because they're Americans. There are people outside of this room, but in our communities, who are less able to resist the government than you are and that I am, and whose lives are interrupted by the world's most oppressive criminal justice system, acting in concert with an insanely counterproductive war on drugs. It is our obligation to reach out and make change on their behalf. There are people who can least afford it, whose resources are taken forcibly under threat of violence to feed a war machine that too often even takes our very lives. It is for them that we must fight. Where have gone the protections that we used to believe we would never lose? Our rights to privacy, to pursue our First Amendment privileges online. Where have gone our protections against Fourth Amendment violations, unreasonable searches and seizures? Where has gone our bodily autonomy? Where has gone our right to work? And by the way, where has gone the simple human dignity of being able to raise our children the way that we see fit? It is quickly slipping through our fingers. Where has gone the simple dignity of being represented by leaders who adhere to our most basic values of the right to pursue peace, prosperity, an attitude of non-aggression? Why is it that we have people who gather power to themselves and allegedly in our name pursue war abroad over and over and over again? Make no mistake about it, our nation is at war again. How much time was there between the end of one and the beginning of another? None. It was overlapping. Our nation has been almost continuously at war for my entire lifetime, and I'm looking around. I think I've got it on everyone else in the room for a long, long time. And so while it is true that I will be focused on the opportunity that we have in 2024, it's not because there's an opportunity for the sake of itself. This is our call of duty. Thank you very much.